Yeah, we're ready to go.
All right, let's go. Good morning, everyone. I am Sylvia Siebold, and I am the National President for Women's Council of Realtors. Thank you for joining us today. We are recording this, and we will have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end, but feel free to use the chat if needed. I just want to thank you for attending today to this very first ever event we've done with association executives. Before we jump in and explain everything, I want to give you a little history about Women's Council of Realtors. For those of you that don't know, Women's Council started in 1938, actually at the suggestion of the then what would have been NAR president, Joseph Catherine. He acknowledged that women were showing up to meetings, but they were not allowed to be involved in the governance. So he suggested that we start our own inclusive organization. So I know DEI is the catchphrase right now. We have always been, since 1938, very inclusive. Yes, our name is Women's Council of Realtors, but we do have male members. In fact, about 10% of our members are male. So there's a little brief synopsis of how we started and why we are here today. Is this year is a strategic planning year for us. Many of you are doing strategic planning, I'm finding, as I'm traveling the nation this year. And so as we are writing this strategic plan, we noticed something interesting. We noticed we are chartering new networks across the nation, and many of those networks are coming to us from you, the association executives. So we did something very right during the COVID years, and that associations were now reaching out to us to help them develop leaders and create new networks. So that got us thinking, let's survey association executives that are members of Women's Council and get some direct feedback. And from those surveys, we did a focus group in which, out of that focus group, this session was founded for us to do a Dell Stinton AE Appreciation Week activity for each of you. And so thank you all for coming here. We're going to jump in and kick this off. And to kick it off, I just have to talk first and foremost about my own AEs. I feel so special to be from the great state of Texas, as well as I'm serving with Leslie Ruda Smith, who is also from the great state of Texas. In fact, not only are we products of Travis Kessler and his leadership, but we also are both members of Collin County Association of Realtors. And so Mary Leidy is very near and dear to each of our hearts. Travis, I know that you're here. I can see you. I can't see if Mary's on here. And I just want to publicly say thank you for all that you've done for me personally on my leadership journey, all that you have done to help support me in Women's Council. And there are not enough words to express my gratitude to you, especially, but also you as you lead Texas Realtors. So thank you. Let's see. I don't believe we have Leslie on yet, do we?
Not yet.
Okay, we will, Jeff, if you'll just let me know when Leslie gets on, we will talk to her at that point. But without further ado, we're going to just jump in and I'm going to turn it over to Travis. I think he's a friendly face to all of you in the association executive world. Travis, you want to kick us off?
I will, and Sylvia, thank you for that, for the kind introduction, and gosh, what a great turnout this morning to have this conversation about the strength and the power that we have together of working between our local and state associations, and of course Women's Council of Realtors. And Sylvia, it's a proud year for Texas to see you at the helm of National Women's Council of Realtors, and then also having Leslie Ruda Smith from Texas leading the National Association of Realtors in 22. And so Sylvia, thank you for stepping up in the leadership role that you have with Women's Council of Realtors. And it's a pleasure to have Jim and Rebecca and Deb here as panelists. And I'm going to ask them in just a minute to do a self-introduction of who they are as our panelists and kind of the role they have at either the local or the state level, and kind of have this conversation that we'll have in answering and asking some questions about the partnered role that we all have between our realtor organizations and Women's Council of Realtors. So Sylvia, it is a proud year, and so thank you for leading such a strong, influential organization that we have in National Women's Council of Realtors. So Sylvia, thank you so much for what you do. And sure has been a fast year. It seems like yesterday that we were part of your installation in San Diego last November. So how fast time does go by. And so I'm going to just kind of jumpstart into some opening comments before I turn over and ask some panelists some of the questions and do an introduction of them as well. But let me just say that in our industry and organization, there is value to collaborate and have a relationship, a partnered relationship. I think we all see the value of that. We wouldn't have you participating today if you didn't see that there was a value in a partnered relationship. And we've got certain questions that we're going to ask because we think we can all be better at what we do when we work together. And Sylvia, comments and accolades to you for putting this together, because it reinforces the role that we have together, because we do value this cooperative, collaborative relationship. Women's Council of Realtors, as long as I have been involved, Women's Council has always been the strength in leadership training and leadership development. You know, I was a local association executive for 25 years, and that was my first outreach. When I first became an AE, Women's Council reached out to me and asked for my involvement, my participation, and encouraged me to get involved at the local level with Women's Council of Realtors. And Sylvia, I value that today. I learned a whole lot. I gained more than I probably gave back to Women's Council just because of the relationships and the interactions at the local level. But at that point, and that was a long time ago, I saw the strength of what we could do between our respective organizations. And I look back at all these years later, and I still see that strength. I still see the value of that relationship. And so it has really kept that momentum. When I transferred over to the state level, I wanted to keep that going in Texas. And for us, it's worked extremely, extremely well. And so I want to open this webinar with a comment that we all compete for time. It's the same number of hours in every day that we all compete for. And so I just want to emphasize that we are not in a competitive relationship between the Realtor organization and Women's Council of Realtors, because we all work together on this. It's not about I want to give my time to the Realtor organization at the local or state level versus giving it to Women's Council of Realtors. I think the purpose of today's webinar is that you're going to hear from our panelists across the country on the value of why and how the partnered relationship is so beneficial. And, you know, if I look at, Sylvia, the relationship that we have with Texas Realtors and Texas Women's Council of Realtors, I would say that your participation of Women's Council at our state level in Texas has added such a value for involvement and engagement in our meetings. We have 2 large meetings a year, plus regional meetings across the state. And I will tell you, every time front and center will be Women's Council of Realtors members. And so, Sylvia, I think that's the lesson that we're all here to learn, and to hear our panelists today, that there is value in that collaborative relationship to call that we are in this together. But just participation in meetings, that involvement and engagement is so influential and so important. But the other 2 aspects that I want to call attention to is that our partnered relationship has added a whole bunch of strength in our relationship in, number 1, advocacy. You know, the things that we do at Realtor Day at the Capitol, and what we do on speaking with one voice on our public policy positions. Sylvia, I think Women's Council has been such an advocate for us at the state level, and just want to reinforce that in my opening comments, that advocacy is a critical part of what we need to do together. And then the last one is the support of what I've seen over the years at the local and the state level would be the amount of participation in the PAC and what we do to support the PAC on a relationship basis. And when we get to that question in a few minutes, we're going to share some numbers with you, and they're quite impressive, Sylvia, with what Women's Council of Realtors across the country has done to help locals and states, and of course RPAC at the national level throughout that dual support relationship. And I use that phrase dual support because it works together as a team. So we're really proud of our engagement, our involvement, and our relationship that we have with the Texas Women's Council of Realtors, and what we do together to reinforce what I call common goal alignment for what we have at the state level. And so at this time, I'm really pleased to have our panelists join this webinar, and I'm going to ask them some questions. But just briefly, we've got Jim Heisler from the state of Illinois. He's a local board CEO. We have Rebecca Grossman from Arizona, who is also a local association CEO. And we have Deb Junkin from Georgia, who is the state CEO for the great state of Georgia. So very pleased to have Jim, Rebecca, and Deb. So Jim, I'm going to start with you, and just if each one of the panelists would do a self-introduction, how large your association is, and just an opening statement about your relationship with Women's Council of Realtors.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for letting me be on the panel. I appreciate that. So Jim Heisler, I'm the CEO of the Heartland Realtor Organization here in Northern Illinois. We are just on my little logo here, just above that heart. So we are right on the Wisconsin border. We're 1,200 members, and we work very well with our Women's Council, synchronized with them. So I think we're all going to sing from the same hymn book here in a minute, but I think that's my opening statement. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jim, and welcome. Deb Junkin, let's go to you next, please.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Deb Junkin, CEO for the Georgia Realtors. We have approximately 52,000 members now, and I just want to say we are incredibly honored to have watched Tammy Knowles' journey, her leadership journey through the WCR. And Tammy's one of the people that brings such enthusiasm to WCR in Georgia. But our relationship is very similar to what Travis, talked about. We love the enthusiasm that our Women's Council brings, and we partner with them on a lot of stuff. And I think through the conversation today, we'll talk more about that. But thank you for allowing me to be with you this morning.
All right. Great opening. Thank you, Deb. Rebecca Grossman, Arizona.
Good morning, everyone, from very sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm the CEO of the Scottsdale Area Association of Realtors. We have about 8,700 primary members, and I'm just excited to share some of the things that we've done with WCR and why they've become such an important partner for us.
Well, very good. So let me jumpstart this conversation. Rebecca, I'm going to start with you, and let me ask this first question about, you've started the conversation about your role with Women's Council of Realtors, but describe, Rebecca, your relationship with Women's Council of Realtors, and what do you value the most about that relationship?
Thank you, Travis. So I've been in AE for over 30 years with 4 different associations. And I have to say that those experiences have varied greatly when it comes to how active or inactive the WCR chapters have been that I've encountered. In one situation, I actually had to help them disband as they just didn't have the support from the realtor community, and they were simply tired of trying. And so as an association, we helped them work towards that dissolution, which was very heartbreaking for me and for those people involved. But in my current association, the experience has been a really good one. We carve out time in our new member orientation for them to promote joining Women's Council, and we partner on events, and we depend on each other to help drive interest and participation. So that's my experience so far, and I'm really looking for ways to continue to grow that relationship. And I'm excited to hear from our other panelists and what your questions are as an audience to help me do that over the years.
Very good. Great opening. Thank you, Rebecca. Deb, let's go back to you next. And what do you value the most about the relationship?
I think it's the friendship. I think it's working with the leaders and watching them develop, watching them move from WCR leadership to state leadership, serving on committees, bringing their perspective. The state association, we have an ACT council, and it's associations collaborating together, and it's all of our different organizations. And WCR has been there from the beginning. They've been with us throughout establishing this. They've provided insight about how to structure it and what the benefits will be. So I think for the state association, it's a little bit different. I started like Travis did at a local, and it was different because we had a brand new organization that was just starting out, trying to find their footing. Whereas now, working with the state leadership, they have their meetings on site with us, but they also have their meetings, their state meetings during our conferences. So that brings an added layer of enthusiasm to our state conferences. It brings attendance to our conferences, but more than anything, it brings the friendship. There's always, anytime you see a group of the WCR members together, there's always a buzz of electricity and excitement. And I think that's one of the things, in addition to the friendship that they bring, that is beneficial to the state organization. And we work very well together, and we try to support each other's goals. So that's.
Yeah, very, very good response, Deb, and what a great opening to what your relationship is. And friendship is such an important part of our relationship building that we have with members in our respective organizations and allied organizations as well. But Deb, you mentioned this, and I don't want to bypass it because I think it's a key point of what you've said. It's called pathway to leadership. I can't tell you, Deb, your comment is very common, and that is you find a leader in Women's Council of Realtors, you will also find them in a leadership role at the local or state level. I think, Sylvia, what Women's Council does for leadership development and leadership training does that. It supports that. And so it's that combined effort on pathways to leadership that makes a difference. It certainly has in Texas, and now I hear in Georgia it's done the same thing. So very good. So Jim, let's go to you with your opening.
Yeah, thank you. I would agree and tag on to that, even though we're a local association, not the state. We synchronize very well with Women's Council. What I like is that when Women's Council does events, and they do them pretty much monthly, we help promote them here at the local association. We talk about Women's Council at our orientation. We sometimes have one of their members come into orientation, our new member orientation, and talk about Women's Council and get people invited and involved. It synchronizes, it builds on the synergy. So we promote their events, we get people to some of their events, and then Travis, as you just said, then they go there, they learn, they find out, they get involved sometimes. And sometimes, you know, we're doing the pitch here in the local association, but maybe for whatever reason, that isn't the place that they start. They start the Women's Council and they get involved there. That's great. But then, as you said, as they move up the ranks or get involved and start to do some more activities there, they often find themselves coming over to Heartland and getting involved in our committees or on our board of directors. There are lots of past presidents of Heartland that were past presidents of Women's Council first, or vice versa. They were our president, then they became Women's Council president. So there's a lot of overlap, but this is a great synergy. And I would say as well, with the events that they run are fantastic. They work with us. They complement what we're doing. I don't view them at all as competition. We have our own education committee. We do our own educational seminars, but we work with Women's Council in order to put together a good series of events. Theirs are mostly more often lunches, ours are not. So it's a good opportunity for people to engage in whatever way they want and however they want, but it's absolutely a complement to each other. Thank you.
Yeah, Jim, I liked your phrase. It's not about competitions. It's about complementing each one of the respective organizations. So very well said. And it's a great description of the relationship that you've got with Women's Council of Realtors as well. Sylvia, I'm going to jump to a question for you as the national president. And you've heard all three panelists talk about the identification of future leaders. We're always trying to identify and cultivate future leaders for the success of the Realtor organization. And that's a real strength of Women's Council of Realtors, is on leadership development and leadership training. So can you weigh in a little bit at what you do at the national level to complement that need at the local and the state level of identifying and cultivating future leaders? And could just talk about how Women's Council accomplishes that.
Absolutely, Travis. You know, we're a grassroots effort organization. Much like RPAC, much like the local association, so many things happen at the grassroots level. And it's really the entry level we found for a lot of realtors to get involved in the realtor organization as a whole. Women's Council is kind of one of those unique things that you come in and you check your name badge at the door. You're no longer a certain real estate company or whatever. You just come in and I walk in the door and I'm Sylvia, and I'm known as Sylvia, and I get to lead in a small manner, whatever fits my life. I can show up and lead in that perspective. And then it starts growing, because once you do one thing, like greeting people at the door, then it grows to the next, and it grows to the next. And the next thing you know, they're applying for their local association board of directors or whatever it is. I know part of my leadership team is able to be here today, and each of us sit on like our local, state, and even potentially NAR board of directors, as well as leading at a high level for Women's Council. In fact, over 25% of the NAR board of directors are actually Women's Council members. So Jim, what you said is absolutely true. We complement each other because first and foremost, we're all realtors. And so we wear that hat. The Women's Council is the and then some. It's the additional part because we're realtors first. We identify leaders at all levels of the organization, and we really rely on our local and state leaders to give names to us at the national level, Travis, as you asked, to do different things, from become presenters to, help them on their pathway, as Tammy and Chris and myself have been helped on our pathway to national presidency. It's all come from leaders before us and in our own states and local organizations helping us.
But Sylvia, I think Women's Council actually created that path, and you put an emphasis on something that needed to be done for the benefit, not only at the national level, but at the state and local level as well. And so thank you for paving that way, because we are the recipient of the benefits that you do with that leadership training and involvement. And I end up with the end result with the end in mind, which is engagement and involvement. So we all win when it comes to that. And so I'm going to kind of throw a different question out for our panelists to answer. And it surrounds this whole concept of who reaches out to whom. When we have allied organizations like the Realtor Organization and Women's Council of Realtors, who reaches out to who first? And I'm going to give an example, because when I first became a local board exec, Women's Council reached out to me. I did not initiate that discussion, that introduction. Women's Council invited me to come to their meeting. And from that point on, they included me as the local CEO. They included me, invited me, and I joined Women's Council. I participated in activities, but it was with this respect that Women's Council came to me to get more involved, to get our leadership involved, to get our members involved. So my question to each of our panelists is, what did you do in your relationship with Women's Council? Did you reach out to Women's Council, or did Women's Council reach out to you? We've got lots of AEs and CEOs on the call today, and we learn from each other. And if we're waiting for one of us to take the initiative to do it, let's learn from those who've done it well. So Deb, I'm going to start with you. And who initiated the first relationship contact? You to them, or Women's Council to you?
So as a local AE, it was actually a couple of our members who came to me and the president and said, we think that our local association can benefit from a Women's Council chapter. And so we kind of developed it together, but it was a couple of members who saw a benefit and brought it to the local leadership. From the state perspective, when I came on, WSAR was very welcoming. They invited me. Faith Reed reached out to me and said, your office is in DeKalb. You need to be a member of the local DeKalb Association. So I've moved my membership from my previous local board to the DeKalb Association because it's right down the road here. And I'm a member today, and I get all of their information. I know everything that they've got going on. I wish I had more time to get to all of the events. I make sure I go to the local event. They always invite me when the state president comes. We're honored to have Sylvia. But I think that's a great question, because it's like, who's going to cross the road first?
Right.
But I would challenge the AEs that are on here to, after this webinar, to reach out to your WCR chapters. Even if there's not one in your local board, there's probably one in your area that has members from your board. and establish a relationship with them and sit down and talk about what's the win-win. How can we work together? What can we do to better serve the members, because they're all the same members.
Yeah, good advice, Deb, and that's a good point. That if Women's Council hasn't reached out to you as the local AE or the state AE, then you reach out to them. I mean, you're hearing the benefits regardless of who makes that contact. So, Jim, what did you do? Who initiated the discussion in your area?
Wow, that's a chicken and the egg kind of thing. I really don't remember how that started. It kind of feels like it always was, and it just was. But I think I'd reiterate Deb's point of, if I were just coming here brand new, and I've been here 17 years, that I'd reach out. I wouldn't want to wait. I mean, I did that with a couple of the other diversity societies, that I reached out to them, said, hey, how do we get involved? What can we do? Can we get a chapter started? But I do think back to, this is a two-way street, and this communications required both ways. There was a few years ago when our chapter was faltering a little bit. Leadership was a little bit scrambled, and people were leaving the industry fast. And the state president of Women's Council gave me a call and said, hey, just want to let you know that in case you haven't heard, the local chapter of WCR is closing. And I said, what are you talking about? And I had not heard a word about this. Oh, there was a big meeting last week and everyone agreed to close this down, that there's not enough people want to get involved. And I was dumbfounded. I remember it was 5 o'clock. I was sitting in my garage, actually at my house on the cell phone. And I said, you're not closing this chapter down. And you could hear the pause. It was a man who was our state president that year. And I said, you're not closing the chapter down. You need to give me 24 hours to figure out what's going on here. And he was a little dumbfounded, like he thought this was a done deal. And I said, I know nothing of this. You're not closing this down without my approval. And so he gave me the 24 hours, and he called me that next afternoon, or I called him, and I said, here's what we're going to do. Here's who's that president's going to be. I said, I know you need to have a certain number of members. We're not there yet, but you need to give me a week and we'll get those members for you. And sure enough, they did. And where are we now? We've got 150 members. We're one of the strongest networks again in the state, but they needed to reach out to me. And I was really, frankly, a little upset that they hadn't, that I've been involved. I go to other events. How did they have some leadership session with past presidents of WCR locally and not include me? Not that I'm a past president, but someone who's this much of a strategic partner, you need to involve them. So I involved them.
But you took the initiative, Jim. So congratulations on doing that, because it made the difference in the success of both organizations, yours locally as well as Women's Council.
And like I said, it's the synergy. We need them as much as they need us. So it works well.
Very good. All right. So Rebecca, what's your story?
Yeah, when I came here, as I mentioned, I'd come from an area that really didn't have a WCR presence. So I came here and all of a sudden I was an honorary member. I'm like, I've never been honorary anything. And these people are reaching out to me and making me feel special. And they actually had me come and install their officers. I didn't even know anybody. I was like, well, this is really cool. And they were just so exuberant and so positive. It was a great experience. And I would say over the years, I have let it lapse sometimes because whoever the current president sometimes isn't as engaged with us. But I really think you have to recognize that there's this codependency that's going on with WCR chapters and the associations, whether you recognize it or not, because they're always going to be the strong leaders that are coming developed and ready to lead. They're always going to be on your board. They're always going to be able to drive numbers to your events and you to them. And depend on you to help when they do RAPAC fundraisers, make them successful. So I agree with Jim. It has to be a two-way communication. Sometimes it will lapse. Either there's a CEO turnover, or there's a president who just doesn't get that relationship, and you just got to keep working it.
Yeah. Well, as you can tell, attendees, our panelists have had some really good experiences in what they did. And we've heard from all three that who initiated the conversation. And frankly, it doesn't matter who initiated it. It's who maintains the relationship. So well done. But Sylvia, I just want to compliment Women's Council of Realtors, because if the local board doesn't do it, I can tell you, Women's Council, you always do. You always take that lead in initiating that discussion. And so compliments to Women's Council, because y'all do an outstanding job in doing that outreach. So AEs on the call today, take note of that, because if they haven't reached out to you, then reach out on your part, because it is worthwhile in the long run. So compliments, Sylvia, to you and your team, because you do that extremely well. So I'm going to switch a little bit of the line of thinking on this because of that question and that conversation. Because as local and state AEs on the call today, sometimes we struggle with priorities and priority setting. And we have to have the support of our local or state leadership before we do anything outside of what the priorities are. So I'm going to ask the three panelists to comment on this question, and that is, in your involvement and your success of this relationship, how do you get your leadership on board that they too are as supportive as you are as the AE? So Rebecca, I'm going to start with you because you've got to have leadership support to keep that and maintain that relationship.
Thank you, Travis. So I have to admit that we don't always have board members or officers that get it when it comes to WCR. In fact, sometimes they're very negative. They will bring up the fact that they think the organization is not relevant anymore, that women are just fine. I can cite some examples where they aren't, but we won't go there today. But I often hear comments about that. That it was needed when women were not given the same opportunities in real estate as men, and that the situation no longer exists. But I think what WCR has done a great job of branching out into leadership development and creating an incredible network. So I'm not sure I agree with those sentiments, and I do try to take them kind of head on and try to give them the rationale for why we do want to keep and grow that relationship. What helps in our organization is that most of our leaders have come up through WCR or down. When you look at someone like Cindy Reddy, who actually was the WCR NAR WCR national president and served in that capacity. And then of all things, you would think she would be, not willing to come back and start over with the local board, but she did. She came back onto our board and became our president. So we want to keep that great leadership sharing alive and well. So that would be my biggest reason to any board member that resists support and collaboration.
Okay, very good. Jim, let's go to you next and answer the same question.
I think I really just assume they're going to be engaging and welcoming of Women's Council. So what I do is I invite our president to come with me to those luncheons every other month. I don't require them to do so, but if they're able to, of course, we're going to pick up their registration fee, which is a help to many of them who are just practicing realtors and not necessarily top producers. Our current president, our incoming president, is a very busy managing broker of 3 different large offices, so she doesn't have as much time. So I don't think she's going to be attending as many. But my outgoing president, he was at probably 7 or 8 of them with me. Very engaging, saw the benefit, and some of the messages, some of the educational sessions that they put on are more attractive, if you will, than others, and some are maybe less. But we still go, we still be recognized by the leaders there, and of course we recognize Women's Council. So even at our installation earlier this month, I have all the people in the room who are Women's Council members stand up, not just the leadership, all the members. And when half the room stands up, it sends a message to the half that's sitting down that, hey, maybe this is something I'm missing. So I don't know what that does, if it gets any new ones, but it's got to start the wheels cranking. So thank you.
Well, that's an important relationship to have. You have to have your local or state leadership as engaged as you are as the AE to show that full benefit of the support. So Deb, what's your story?
So we have about 500 WCR members in Georgia of our 52,000. And we just hosted our annual conference in Nashville, and we had over 1,100 in attendance. And I would be surprised if there wasn't at least 75% of those 500 that were a part of that 1,100, supporting the state association, coming together. A couple of years ago, Tammy, when she was local president or state president, had asked me to come and do strategic planning for the state organization, that they then developed goals for the state and for the 9 local networks that they have. There are those who don't support or encourage engagement with the Women's Council. But if you look at statistics, if you look at, there's still a disparity between leadership opportunities. When you look at the National Association, when you look at some of the local associations that are predominantly male. So having a WCR network within the state and within the local association, that it's intimidating. Georgia has almost 400 on our board of directors. That's an intimidating first step. But to be able to join a local network, to be able to meet people, it's always awkward being the first person, the newbie in the room when you don't know anybody. But when you have a smaller organization that is dedicated to your success, and that's what they do, they bring you in, they develop you, they help you to be the leader that they know you are, that you just haven't accepted yet. And then to see those leaders develop. I was looking through our roster of local network presidents, and every one of those local network presidents are serving at the state association in some manner. You know, Tammy serves as the national treasurer. Well, we've tagged her to serve on our audit committee because the knowledge that she's getting from serving in that position, we don't want to not take advantage of that and have her bring her skills and what she's learned. And I think that is one of the biggest things that people miss. They see it as a competition. And that's one of the things we talked about with the strategic planning, is that helping the locals see the partnership opportunities and the growth opportunities and the leadership line. Because if you help them help their members develop those leadership skills, you're going to be seeing, you're going to be able to watch the new leaders coming up down the line. You're going to be able to see those leadership qualities. And so that's what I feel is important. But just like Rebecca and Jim, there are others who aren't going to buy in. And so the association executive has to carry the torch for those local chapters and the state chapter.
Well, it really shows the support by all three of our panelists of the collaboration between the AE, the CEO, and Women's Council, but also their leadership and the importance of getting that buy-in. So such an important role in what we do. Sylvia, I think another compliment to Women's Council Realtors is the fact that during the pandemic, we all learned how to use Zoom. Even today's meeting is in this webinar. And I'll tell you this from the Texas perspective, Deb, to elaborate on your point. We started meeting every quarter with our leadership team and the state Women's Council leadership. They wanted to know what was going on, the updates, the essential business activities we were doing. And so we had the opportunity as a leadership team to jump on a 30-minute Zoom at the state level. And so AEs, let's not lose the opportunity that even though we're somewhat out of the pandemic and we're back to in-person meetings, don't lose the platforms like today and reaching out between your leadership teams and your local networks leadership team or your state leadership team of Women's Council, because that relationship, from what you're hearing, is an added benefit, and it's a complement, not a competition between all of the entities. So Sylvia, I'm gonna switch the story, and because we're hearing from the AEs on what their relationship is, I'm going to ask you the question as the national leader. What do you need and expect from the local or the state associations to be successful?
I'm so glad you asked that, Travis, because I'm sitting here writing notes. Like I have some feedback to give to that question. So I'm so glad you asked that. And I think the thing that I can express to all of you is our leaders change every single year. The AEs are the consistency. And I'm not sure if you realize how important that is. You and your staff are the consistent ones. We come in, we go, we come in, we go. And so if you want to build your pipeline, I think every panelist has said that many of their leaders come from Women's Council. If you want to build that pipeline for the future, the best thing as an AE that you can do is, pick up the phone and ask the local leadership, not even just the president, like start building your pipeline and that relationship for potentially a couple of years. Ask them to coffee and get to know them and start learning about them, because you will have crossover where they will start filling your pipeline, whether it's on a committee or whatever they're doing at your association. So just ask them to coffee and, share the calendar. The worst thing as a Women's Council leader is if you have had something on your calendar for 6 months and then you find out that your association put something at the exact same time. So really work on sharing a calendar so you're not competing with each other, because you do want the Women's Council members to show up at your events and they want you to show up to theirs. So really sit down, have a planning meeting so that you can be there for those events, and then really show up. Showing up means all the difference in the world. The biggest difference between a Women's Council network and an association, whether it's local or state, is Women's Council has no staff. And so they are doing this 100% on their own, and they're trying to run a real estate business. I'm not asking you to staff them. I'm asking you to support them and be there as that consistent person, that just consistency in general for the local network. And, you know, one way, I'm just going to throw it out there, Travis, that especially in the local realm, is because of that change. If a local association will allow a Women's Council to use the association as their mailing address, that is the biggest help anyone can do, and it doesn't cost you anything. As an association, it gives a central mailbox for a local network to walk in, and they pick up their mail out of that mailbox, wherever the slot is that you have for them, versus having to change mailing addresses every single year. That's just one of the absolute simplest ways that an association can really support a Women's Council.
Yeah, Sylvia, that's a key point. And I want to emphasize this because we all get lost in our calendars and our events. And you're right, you've got to compare the availability of dates. How many times have we looked at the calendar and the association or a local board has an event, and then maybe Women's Council has a competing event? That's where the competition wasn't effective as much as it would be under the partnered collaboration event. And so that's a key point, is just to compare calendars so that you can offset and not compete with the most valuable commodity that we have, which is time. And so, Sylvia, point well taken. And you're right, at the state and the local level of Women's Council of Realtors, they are almost all volunteer driven. There is not a staff person at the local or state level in most of these cases. And so there is a reliance on continuity between the local, state, and Women's Council of Realtors. And so I like your idea of the common address so that you don't get lost in the shuffle and have to start over every year. So Sylvia, I'm gonna piggyback on your response to that and ask you to respond to this. And that is, you know, for years, I think most of the attendees on the webinar today call them Women's Council of Realtors local chapters. Women's Council did change that to networks. And so there's not a network in every community, but so if there's not, how does a local association reach out to Women's Council of Realtors to form a network?
Well, honestly, Travis, you can call us a chapter, you can call us a network. I don't care as long as you call us.
Yeah.
But really, we did change from chapter to network, but we will respond to whatever you want to call us. But yes, just reach out. If you do not have a network in your local area and you are interested in that, definitely send us an email. Jamie Saltman, she's actually on here. She's our director of engagement, and she is the one that can help walk through that. Now, I will say, and Jeff just dropped her email address in the chat. I will say that we have had associations reach out this year and they want to start a Women's Council network, but it is not association driven. That is a firm difference between, for example, a YPN and a Women's Council. We do want association support. We want you to be there, but it needs to be run by realtors. It needs to not be staffed by associations. And we're happy to have that conversation and help you get started in forming a network. I know we have some associations that have smaller counts of realtor members, and we do have it's about an 800 to 1,000 required realtors in an area to start a network, but it doesn't stop you from maybe doing a regional network that would encompass a more regional area than just a small association. And we are happy to have all of those conversations. And again, Jamie's email's there. You can always reach out to myself if you need to get in touch with her. We are happy to make that connection for you. because we are expanding. We have grown by leaps and bounds this year. I cannot even tell you, we surpassed the 12,000 member mark last week when I was in the office, actually, which was a great day of celebration. And we've chartered 3 new networks in one state where we had no presence this year. So we are definitely growing and filling in gaps where we have been missing across the national landscape.
Yeah, Sylvia, thank you for that. Really like the idea of a regional approach to this. And if you can't do it locally by yourself, reach out and do it on a regional basis. Very, very important to do so. Let me switch gears a little bit too and go back to the panelists. And Jim, I'm going to start with you on this next question. But I think we're hearing some great success stories and great conversations. I'd like to ask each one of our panelists to answer this question, and that is, if you would, describe one initiative or one program in which you partnered with Women's Council of Realtors and you deem it was a great success. What was that initiative, and just a little bit of a description about it? So Jim, I'm going to start with you.
All right, well, of course, I'm going to give you 2, but I'll do the first one really quick. So Heartland had a boat tour. We are located on the Fox River here in McHenry County. Heartland did a boat trip up the river, just a 2-hour tour up the river, and Women's Council got engaged. And the next year we really tossed it over to them and let them have it. But it was just a great success that it worked well for us, but they wanted it. We just said, take it away, we'll still help promote it. But it was great. But then what we did from there is we are partnering with Women's Council and NAR, getting a grant to do a combined event. We do it every November. And we do it about sexual exploitation and human trafficking. So it's a great event, a nice luncheon. We get a grant from NAR and bring in some really good local presenters to talk about that topic. So it's been a success. We stopped during COVID, or 2 of them we missed, but we're bringing it back again this year. And it's been a great program, and really proud that we're doing that. It's a great topic and a good turnout.
Great example. So Deb, what initiative or program worked for you?
The one that jumps out at me the most is the 50th anniversary celebration that we did during one of our conferences. The WCR leadership, Norm Kennedy was the president, and wanted to host a reception in honor of the 50th anniversary. But to do so for all the members that were attending, that's a lot. So we typically do a reception. So we partnered with, and we put the money that we would typically put for a reception and partnered with the association so that the reception was open to all of the attendees. And I believe they received memberships from that, from people who had never been to a WCR function, because it was a part of the state association, and it was very positive. And so we're looking to do things like that in the future. Something that's happening that we just finished is we had a presidential advisory group on Georgia doing a Women in Real Estate conference, and the state president-elect, because we'll be doing it next year for WCR, served on that PAG, because we wanted to make sure that we were getting that input and having that information as well. So I think in addition to serving on the ACT Council with us and helping with that PAG, and then partnering for the 50th anniversary, because it gave exposure to WCR that they'd never had before. They also, like I said, meet at our conferences and set up information booths and participate in everything that we do. But I think the 50th anniversary was a very successful event that just went over very well and gave a lot of exposure.
A great example of that partnered role. So Rebecca, what was your program or initiative?
Yeah, I popped a quick slide into the chat because I was going to do a screen share, but I don't want to mess anything up here. But, obviously with COVID, we had to scale back on our events and such. But in June of this year, we did partner with WCR to host a safety event, and it was a really big success. The cross promotion was great, and WCR appreciated the reach that we provided outside of WCR membership, because some of our chapters are not that large, but these offerings would appeal on a broader scale. So the realtor safety is, it's such an important topic, and WCR is able to get the interest that sometimes we aren't able to. So it was really easy to collaborate on this type of event, and I find that WCR members are so engaged and they're always looking for opportunities to learn and grow. So why not co-brand as much as you can? That would be my advice.
All right. Very, very good examples. You know, we have Leslie Ruda Smith who joined us now, and we're going to let her make a few comments. But Leslie, we just want to say thank you to you. At the very beginning of today's webinar, we recognized the strength of women in real estate, women in powerful, influential leadership roles. And Leslie Ruda Smith, you and Sylvia Seabolt, I'm really proud today to say that how proud Texas is of both of you for being from our great state, but also what you each have done to excel in this organization and offer your leadership skills. Leslie, you have always been a supporter of Women's Council of Realtors from day one. I remember our story, your story that you told when we traveled together when you were in state leadership in Texas, and the strength that and the confidence that Women's Council gave you. You were not a confident speaker, if I remembered the story that you told. And Women's Council said, Leslie, you're going to do this, and you're going to get up to the podium and look at where you are today. An eloquent speaker, the leader of our organization, 1.6 million members. And you kind of got your start within Women's Council of Realtors and the empowerment and the confidence they gave you. And so, Leslie, we're proud of you and leading this role along with Sylvia for Women's Council. So let's hear your story, Leslie, and just a few opening comments about Women's Council.
So I just got back from Alaska last night, and guess where I am? I'm back at the airport. So I don't know how I ever thought I was going to squeeze this in, but I'm sorry for all the noise because I did just go through security. But I just wanted to say hello to all of you and thank you all for all that you do. I'm really proud of Travis Kessler, my state CEO for Texas, and of course, my local CEO, Mary Leidy, my fun-loving CEO at the local level. I also would like to thank Women's Council for all they've done for me. It's awesome to be the first president and only president in our 115-year NAR history to lead the first and only female leadership team that is majority female. Out of 7, 5 are women, and it's really exciting to be a part of that. Yes, I was scared to death to speak, and I don't know why, because I grew up dancing on stage, so I was used to being in front of people, but give me a microphone and I just wanted to run. In Women's Council, and I literally had friends from their 20s to their 90s. Many of you remember Evie Halliday, she falls in that latter category, and they always encouraged me and were there to help me overcome my fear of public speaking. I have a lot of things I could talk about when it comes to that, but that's a whole other session. But if you have a fear of public speaking, you can always talk to me because I'll give you some pointers, and it is all in your head. So I got over that, as you can tell, and who would have ever thought I'd be where I am today. And I am so proud to serve as your president in 2022. And a big thank you to Sylvia, our national president, who's also not only from my state association, but also the same local association. So we are Texas and Collin County proud. I know Dale Stinton AE Appreciation Day is tomorrow, and I've worked a lot with Dale over the years. So a big thank you to him and all the work he does, and Bob Goldberg and their predecessors. And thank you all, association executives. You are our unsung heroes. You are the ones who make it all happen, and we couldn't appreciate you more. Keep up the great work and know that I'm here to cheer you on along the way. And if there's anything I can do, reach out to me. My email is Leslie, Leslie at leslie22.com. Easy to remember. Thanks again for letting me barge in late.
All right. Well, Leslie, thank you for joining us this morning, and mostly thank you for being the president of the National Association of Realtors. Certainly proud of you. So thank you.
I'm going to go board now, but thank you all very much.
Thank you.
See you later.
And so I'm going to ask one last question, and as we wrap this up, because I want to leave some time to see if there are questions that you all are generating as AEs that you would like to have and take advantage of while we've got this outstanding panel. But Sylvia, I'm going to do one last kind of comment and a question for you, and that is on what Women's Council of Realtors has done over the years in supporting the PAC, our PAC, and our state PACs as well, under the umbrella of what I would call just advocacy in general. And just a compliment to the Texas network in our state, Women's Council has consistently supported the PAC. They do fundraisers on our behalf. They have raised our major investor goal because of their involvement. They have increased our participation level, and of course, the monetary contribution that's made for fundraising. And Sylvia, I just want to say thank you for Women's Council for what you do to help the common alignment of goals, especially with the PAC. So I'm going to ask you to kind of highlight that goal that you have within National Women's Council of Realtors in one of your goals of trying to create that synergy and that energy to support our PAC and advocacy at our local and state level. So Sylvia, would you comment on what Women's Council is doing in that realm?
Absolutely, Travis. So I think one of the things we learned from our survey that we surveyed of association executives is you appreciated the participation we do in our PAC. And we have numbers that back that up. Just last year, and these are last year's 2021 stats, over $3 million, $3.1 million was contributed from Women's Council members to the PAC. We had last year 1,611 major investors and 471 President Circle. I want to tout that President Circle because we do a President Circle reception every year and we're at capacity. We're outgrowing it. I believe it was 33% of all attendees last year in the Bahamas were Women's Council members. And we had a lot of people that didn't attend because it was in the Bahamas. So, and all the COVID restrictions and everything. So that speaks volumes. Our average investment is $462. We are the highest in the realtor family for that average investment. And also our participation is 58% of Women's Council members, which is the highest in the realtor family. If you take our designation, the performance management designation, we have a 77% participation rate out of our designation. So we do put our money where our mouth is. But one of the things that I actually want to draw everyone's attention to, because it was something I never thought of until I was in California and I heard Otto speaking, and Otto talked about how they had a major something going on in one town. Can't even tell you what town it was. The semantics don't even matter. But what he said is they needed bodies to show up. And so what they did is they called the Women's Council Network, and the local network had their members show up at a city council meeting. They weren't asking them to speak. They weren't asking them to do anything. All they were asking was for that advocacy to show up and be a body in a seat. And it spoke volumes. It helped them get what they needed, whatever initiative they were going for to go through. And so I want to have this opportunity. I don't want the opportunity to pass without saying that to all these AEs. Reach out when you need something. I can't guarantee an entire network is going to show up, but I can guarantee they can rally some troops and they will show up and be there for you, because that is what we do. Our hashtag is for a long time been Leaders Made Here, because we do make leaders in Women's Council, but we also are Women's Council. And we've started using I am Women's Council, because whether I show up to a city council meeting, a association event, an HOA, something or other, or PTA, it doesn't matter where I show up, I am Women's Council and I'm carrying that hat with me. And so I encourage you, tap into your leaders, build that relationship so that when you need something, you need somebody to show up, they're there for you. Does that help, Travis?
It does. And Sylvia, that's a great testimonial. And as a local or a state AE, we all appreciate that willingness to do it. Your numbers are impressive with what you do at the national level. And we all ought to take note of those numbers, because it is about that partnership. So Sylvia, thank you for sharing that. And for all of those participating on the Zoom call today, thank you for doing this. Jeff, I'm going to see, I know it's right at noon and our hour is up, but if there are any burning questions, can we open the lines to see if there are any questions of our great panelists today, or to Sylvia as the national president? We've got just a few seconds to open up any Q&A if there
Absolutely.
are any.
If anyone has any questions, just just unmute yourself and go right ahead and ask them.
And before we do a question, I just want to express, we do have our national conference in conjunction with the NXT or Next or whatever it's being called in Orlando in November. And if you purchase the Premier Access, you are welcome to come over to the Women's Council meetings, pop in and see what's happening, or see your own local members just to be able to pass them in the hall and give them a hug or whatever. So I would encourage you, if you're doing that Premier Access, to come on over.
Yeah. And Jeff and Sylvia, I don't see any burning questions in the chat, but let me just make this comment. Email any one of us, any of the panelists, Sylvia directly. We'll make sure everybody has our email addresses after you get off of this webinar. But let us know if there are questions that you didn't want to ask that you just now want more information on. Sylvia, I think you said it well at the very beginning of this webinar on the importance of our relationships, local, state, and national. And I think you said it well, because Women's Council of Realtors, and you put, and then some. I remember that theme, and it's so good, because the and then some just means that we are great partners. We can do more if we do it together. And so, Sylvia, I think the and then some statement that you made earlier was so apropos and just appropriate to make sure that we all realize that you're always willing to go beyond the initial measures, going beyond the call of duty, as they say, to make sure that it gets done. Share the calendar. It's all about complementing each other, not competing with each other. That was the common theme for today. But I just want to summarize, I think, the 5 points that I got out of this meeting, out of this webinar, from the input of Sylvia and the panelists. I think they all stressed the same things, very similar things. But number one is the networking opportunities that we can do together. It's the same member, it's just more participation. And so networking opportunities are there. Number two, and you heard from Sylvia, the high level of RPAC and advocacy support. Such an important part of our relationship, cornerstone of what we exist for and why we exist. And so that was the second takeaway, was this collaborative PAC and advocacy support, that we can do this together. The third one is about involvement and engagement. It's about event participation. As long as we don't compete with dates and have overlapping events, point well taken on that. But event participation was my third takeaway of what we can all do together. Number four for me was a big one. And that is the emphasis that Women's Council of Realtors, what you place on leadership training and leadership development. And I just call it a leadership pipeline. And so I think we all benefit from that at all levels of our Realtor organization by what Women's Council does in that leadership pipeline. And number five, I think my last takeaway on this is the amount of support that Women's Council gives to our Realtor associations. That compatible relationships all makes us better and stronger and more influential together. So it's all about that supportive role of what the respective organizations do. So this has been a great webinar today. I just want to say a very special thank you to Sylvia Seabolt for leading the National Women's Council of Realtors and what you do at the national level to support the lofty goals that you have set. But also a very special thank you to our panelists, Jim, Rebecca, and Deb. Thank you for sharing your stories, your success stories, your testimonials, and look forward to doing more of these. But it's just great to have a conversation to show how that we can complement, not compete, as teams to make us a better organization. So thank you, everybody, and look forward to more conversations about these partnered roles that we have together. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis, my own state AE, Mary Leidy, and of course, our executive, Jeff Hornberger for Women's Council. We appreciate each and every one of you on this call, as well as your brothers and sisters out there that could not be on this call. Thank you for all you do for the industry, for each and every one of us, on behalf of all the realtors that you represent. I'm just going to say thank you to you for that, because I know that you get 1 week of appreciation out of the whole year, and I hope it's combined with all kinds of love, because we do appreciate you each and every day. So from all of us at Women's Council, thank you for what you do for our industry.
All right, everybody have a great week. See you in Orlando. Thank you.